Captain Marcus Stone sat at his desk in the small, dimly lit office aboard the U.S. Titan, his fingers tapping lightly against a stack of retorts. His eyes were tired. The years of service in the Earth Defense Force had begun to wear on him. He was a decorated soldier, having fought in countless skirmishes across the galaxy, yet this morning was different. A strange, encrypted message blinked on his screen, its origin unreadable. At first, Marcus assumed it was another joke or some kind of spam, but as he read the message again, something didn't feel right. The message was addressed to him, specifically. His first instinct was to delete it, but curiosity gnawed at him. "You are cordially invited to attend the royal wedding of Princess Zdirith of the Zorakian Empire," the message began, and a chill ran down Marcus's spine. He had heard of the Zorakians, of course. They were a race of powerful, technologically advanced aliens, far beyond humanity in some ways. Their empire was vast, stretching across multiple star systems. Yet, why would they invite a mere soldier from Earth to attend their princess's wedding? Confused, Marcus opened the message fully, but before he could read any further, a soft knock echoed at his door. He glanced up to see Lieutenant Adams standing in the doorway, a puzzled look on his face. "Captain, there's a message for you from the diplomatic corps. Something about an invitation." Marcus gestured for Adams to enter, his mind already racing with questions. Adams handed him a small datapad, and Marcus scanned the details quickly. It confirmed what he had seen in the encrypted message. The Zorakians had indeed sent an official invitation for him to attend the wedding of Princess Zdirith. He frowned and reread the message. There was no explanation for why he, a soldier, had been selected. "Could be some kind of diplomatic gesture," Adams suggested, clearly just as confused. "The Zorakians have been quiet with us lately, but this could be a way to open up new channels." Marcus didn't respond immediately, his mind still working through the possibilities. A wedding. A soldier like him, chosen to attend a royal event. It didn't add up. What did the Zorakians want from him? His thoughts were interrupted by another message that appeared on the screen. A high-level encryption code from the Earth Defense Forces Command Center. The message was brief. "This is not a prank. We have been in contact with the Zorakians. Your presence at the wedding is requested. Your participation is important." Marcus ran his fingers through his short, dark hair and sighed. The situation was more complicated than he had thought. He didn't know why he was being invited, but something told him that this wasn't going to be just another diplomatic mission. There was more at play here, something bigger than he could comprehend. With no other choice, Marcus nodded at Adams, who stood waiting for his next orders. "Prepare the ship. We leave for Zorakian space at once," Marcus said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of uncertainty. As he walked toward the ship's docking bay, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. The stars outside seemed to twinkle with secrets, and Marcus Stone, a simple soldier, was about to step into a world where nothing was as it seemed. Captain Marcus Stone stood in the docking bay, gazing at the sleek, metallic shape of the Zorakian ship that awaited him. Its design was unlike anything he had ever seen, organic yet futuristic, with smooth curves that seemed to shimmer under the artificial lights. The ship was much larger than any Earth vessel he had ever boarded, and the more he stared at it, the more he wondered what kind of technology the Zorakians had used to construct it. "Everything set, Captain?" Lieutenant Adams asked, stepping up beside him. His voice held a mix of excitement and caution. Like Marcus, Adams was confused, but also curious about this mysterious invitation. Marcus nodded, his mind still reeling from the earlier events. The encrypted message, the official confirmation from the Earth Defense Force. It all seemed too surreal. Why him? Why a simple human soldier? He wasn't an ambassador or a diplomat. His entire career had been focused on combat, not diplomacy or royal weddings. "Let's go," Marcus replied, his voice steady. He stepped onto the ramp, followed by Adams and a small security detail. The air inside the Zorakian ship was thick with an unfamiliar musky scent, like the smell of earth after a heavy rain. The crew members, tall and slender, moved silently through the corridors. Their presence was both commanding and serene, as if they didn't need to speak to be understood. A Zorakian officer, his silver skin gleaming under the soft lights, approached Marcus. The officer spoke in a language Marcus couldn't understand, but the translator embedded in Marcus's ear kicked in instantly, allowing him to comprehend the words. "We are honored by your presence, Captain Stone," the Zorakian said, bowing slightly. His voice was smooth but carried a weight of authority. "The princess awaits you. Please, follow me." Marcus nodded, though his mind was still filled with questions. He had read about Zorakian culture, their advanced technology, their royal customs, their history, but nothing could prepare him for the experience of being aboard their ship. It was beautiful, yet alien, with vast hallways lined with glowing panels that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own. The walls were covered in strange symbols that Marcus could only assume were ancient Zorakian scripts. As they walked deeper into the ship, Marcus couldn't help but notice the occasional glance from the Zorakian crew. Their eyes were curious, almost intrigued by him. It wasn't just his rank that seemed to attract their attention. It was as if they were studying him, trying to figure out what kind of human he was. When they finally arrived at the observation deck, Marcus was surprised by the view. The stars outside were bright and close, stretching across the endless void of space. The Zorakian ship moved silently through the cosmos, and for a moment, Marcus felt small. He had spent most of his life among the stars, fighting battles for his people, but this was different. This wasn't a fight. It was something else entirely. The Zorakian officer led him to a small private room where a table had been set up with strange, glowing instruments. The room was simple but elegant, with soft lighting that seemed to change with every movement. "We will be arriving at Zorakian space soon," the officer said, his voice calm. "Princess Zareth looks forward to meeting you." Marcus's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the princess. He had only seen her once, briefly, during the wedding announcement, but there was something about her presence that had lingered in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more he felt as though this wedding, this invitation, was just the beginning of something far more complicated than he could ever have imagined. The ship hummed quietly beneath his feet as they made their way toward the heart of the Zorakian Empire. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life was on the brink of an unexpected change, one that would lead him down a path he was not ready for. But it was too late to turn back now. The journey had already begun, and the truth, whatever it was, would soon be revealed. The journey through deep space had been smooth, and as Captain Marcus Stone stood before the large observation window of the Zorakian ship, he couldn't help but marvel at the sight before him. The blackness of space stretched endlessly, but ahead, a planet shimmered with life. It was a beautiful sight. Zorak, the capital world of the Zorakian Empire. He had heard stories of its grandeur, but nothing could prepare him for the reality. The planet was covered in vast cities that seemed to rise from the land itself, towering structures made of living materials that pulsed with an inner light. The buildings appeared almost organic, as if they had grown from the very soil. There was no visible pollution, no signs of decay, just a thriving, vibrant civilization that seemed to hum with energy. The sight was awe-inspiring, and for the first time in his career, Marcus felt like a visitor in a place far beyond his understanding. As the Zorakian ship descended toward the surface, Marcus's attention was drawn to the sleek ships that zipped through the atmosphere, gliding effortlessly like birds. They seemed to be made of the same material as the city, blending perfectly with the environment. The Zorakians had mastered the art of blending technology with nature, something that Earth had yet to achieve. The ship finally touched down in a large, beautifully designed docking bay. The bay was surrounded by glowing trees, their branches swaying gently in the wind. The air was fresh, different from the recycled atmosphere of his own ship. The atmosphere on Zorak was heavier, thicker, with a strange, pleasant fragrance that made Marcus take a deep breath. "We have arrived, Captain Stone," the Zorakian officer said, his voice respectful but emotionless. Marcus nodded, his eyes still taking in the breathtaking view. He could see other ships docking, some of them from distant star systems. This was truly an intergalactic gathering, unlike anything he had ever experienced. The royal wedding was not just a celebration of union. It was a statement to the galaxy. It was a message of peace, of strength, and of unity between worlds. As Marcus stepped off the ship, he was greeted by a group of Zorakian dignitaries. They were tall, with shimmering silver skin and eyes that seemed to glow faintly. They stood straight, their movements fluid and graceful, as if every step had been carefully choreographed. There was no rush in their demeanor, no anxiety. It was as if they were used to royalty, used to being in the presence of greatness. "Welcome to Zorak, Captain," one of the dignitaries said, his voice deep and melodic. "Princess Zareth awaits you." Marcus's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the princess. He had met her briefly in the message, but seeing her in person, even through the holographic projections, was different. He had been told she was the most important figure in the Zorakian Empire, a leader who would guide her people into a new era. But Marcus didn't know what he was supposed to do. He wasn't here as a diplomat. He wasn't here as a soldier. Yet everything about this situation felt like it was preparing him for something far bigger than a simple diplomatic mission. As the dignitaries escorted him through the palace, Marcus noticed how everything seemed to be in perfect harmony. The architecture was a mix of alien and natural elements, with high, sweeping arches that seemed to stretch into the sky. The walls were lined with what looked like living vines, their leaves glowing softly, providing an ethereal glow to the halls. The entire palace was a work of art, both beautiful and functional. Despite the elegance of the surroundings, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was not quite right. There was an undercurrent of tension in the air, something that wasn't immediately obvious but lingered beneath the surface. The Zorakians, for all their grace and sophistication, seemed to be watching him closely, as if waiting for something. He shook off the feeling and focused on the task at hand. He was here as a guest, nothing more. But the more he saw of Zorakian culture, the more he realized that this was no ordinary wedding. There was something more going on, something that involved him, and he had no idea what it was. All he knew was that his journey had only just begun. Captain Marcus Stone's first official meeting with Princess Zareth was set in a grand circular hall adorned with glowing crystals that floated gently above the floor. The room had an ethereal glow, casting soft, shifting shadows on the walls. It felt like a dream, something out of an ancient myth rather than reality. Marcus tried to shake off the feeling of being out of place as he stood there, waiting. He had been briefed on the formalities and traditions of Zorakian royal life, but nothing could have prepared him for the moment he would meet the woman at the center of this grand spectacle. Princess Zareth entered the hall like a vision. She was tall, taller than most humans, with smooth, silver-blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the soft light. Her eyes were a deep shade of violet, almost glowing, and they seemed to study Marcus with a sharp yet calm intelligence. Her presence was commanding, but there was also a kindness in the way she looked at him. She was dressed in a flowing gown that seemed to change color as she moved, a living fabric that adapted to the environment. The gown made her seem like she was part of the palace itself, blending perfectly with her surroundings. "Captain Stone," she said, her voice melodic, yet firm. "It is an honor to finally meet you in person." Marcus could hardly believe the words coming from her. This was the princess of the Zorakian Empire, a being of unimaginable power and influence. Yet she spoke to him like he was an equal. The shock was evident in his face, and Zareth smiled softly, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. "I understand you must be confused," she continued. "The situation is unusual, even for us." Marcus nodded, though he couldn't find the right words. The invitation, the wedding, his presence, it all felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. Why was he here? Why had they chosen him, a simple soldier, for something as important as a royal wedding? You have questions, Zareth said, as if reading his mind, but I will answer them when the time is right. For now, know this. Your arrival here is not a coincidence. You have been chosen, Captain, for something far greater than you realize. Before Marcus could respond, a group of royal advisors entered the room. Their presence was quiet but intense. They didn't speak, but Marcus could feel their eyes on him, studying him with interest. Zareth gestured for them to leave, and the advisors nodded before retreating back into the hallway. Come, Zareth said, turning toward a nearby archway that led deeper into the palace. I would prefer to speak in private. Marcus followed her, his curiosity growing. What was going on? Why did she seem to be holding something back? As they walked down the long corridors, Zareth finally spoke again. You're not just here as a guest, Captain, she said, her voice lowering. You are here because of a prophecy that speaks of a human soldier who will unite the Zorakian Empire and Earth. The prophecy foretells that this soldier will be my partner, my equal. Together, we will guide our two peoples through the coming challenges. Marcus stopped walking, his mind racing. A prophecy, but I'm just a soldier. I don't even know anything about your empire. Zareth turned to face him, her violet eyes full of sincerity. It is true that you don't know, but your strength, your honor, and your courage have already been tested. You have already proven yourself in ways you cannot see. You are the one chosen to stand beside me, to help lead us into a new era. Marcus couldn't believe it. A prophecy. A soldier from Earth chosen to unite with a Zorakian princess. It was too much. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he simply nodded, still processing everything she had said. Zareth seemed to understand his shock. I know this is hard to believe, but I need you to trust me. Our people are on the brink of a new chapter. There is more at stake than just a wedding. You and I are part of something much larger, something that will affect the future of both our civilizations. Marcus stood in stunned silence, trying to make sense of everything. There was no denying that the Zorakians were a powerful empire, and the stakes were high. But he had never signed up for anything like this. He was just a soldier, nothing more, nothing less. But in that moment, something deep inside him told him that this journey, this strange invitation, wasn't just a random event. It was the start of something far bigger, something that would change everything he knew. And for the first time, Marcus felt the weight of the universe on his shoulders. The day of the wedding had arrived, and the grand palace of Zorak was filled with an air of anticipation. Captain Marcus Stone stood in front of a large mirror in a luxurious dressing room, adjusting the ceremonial outfit he had been provided. It was a strange blend of Zorakian design and human practicality. A sleek, silver uniform adorned with intricate symbols that seemed to shift depending on the light. The material was light but durable, and for some reason, it felt oddly familiar to Marcus, as if it had been designed with him in mind. As he adjusted the collar, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. You look ready, Captain. It was Lieutenant Adams, who had been assigned to accompany him during the entire mission. Marcus gave a half-smile, still trying to wrap his head around the entire situation. I'm not sure what I'm ready for. This whole thing feels like I've stepped into someone else's story. Adams chuckled, though there was an edge of nervousness in his voice. Yeah, I'm starting to feel the same way. But we're here now. It's too late to back out. Marcus nodded, then turned to look at his reflection again. He didn't recognize the man staring back at him. A simple soldier from Earth was supposed to be a guest at a royal wedding, not a participant. But as much as he had tried to deny it, there was something larger at play. He had been chosen, and the weight of that decision was now more real than ever. Ready, Captain? Adams asked again, clearly trying to ease the tension in the air. Marcus took a deep breath and nodded. Let's do this. The two men exited the dressing room, following a group of Zorakian attendants who led them through the palace's grand halls. The palace, which had seemed so serene and peaceful before, now felt alive with energy. The walls seemed to hum with excitement, and the distant sounds of the ceremony's preparations echoed in every corner. As they entered the grand hall where the wedding ceremony would take place, Marcus was struck by the sheer scale of it. The hall was enormous, with tall columns that stretched toward the high vaulted ceiling. The air was filled with the soft scent of exotic flowers, their petals glowing faintly in the dim light. The entire room seemed to shimmer with a strange, otherworldly beauty. At the front of the room, the royal dais was set with 2 thrones, one larger than the other. It was clear that one throne would be for Princess Xerath, but the second, the one beside hers, was a mystery to Marcus. The Zorakian officials had been very careful not to tell him what his role in the ceremony was, and he had only just learned that he would be standing beside her during the event. But what did that mean? Was he really a guest, or was he meant to be more? Princess Xerath entered the room moments later, and a hush fell over the gathered guests. The Zorakians were a race of elegance and power, but even among them, Xerath stood out. She was regal, her silver-blue skin gleaming like polished glass, and her violet eyes seemed to shimmer with purpose. As she walked toward the dais, her gown trailing behind her like a living river of color, the room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus couldn't help but stare. She was more beautiful in person than he could have imagined, but there was also a quiet strength about her, a quiet power that radiated from her every step. She was the future of the Zorakian Empire. And as much as Marcus still didn't understand why he was involved in this, he knew that he was now a part of her story. When Xerath finally reached the dais, she turned toward Marcus, her violet eyes meeting his. For a brief moment, the world seemed to fade away. It was as if the ceremony, the palace, and the galaxy itself no longer mattered. There was only the 2 of them, standing on the edge of something enormous. The Zorakian officiant stepped forward, his voice low but filled with gravitas. "We are gathered today to witness the union of Princess Xerath of the Zorakian Empire and Captain Marcus Stone of the Earth Defense Force. This union is not just the joining of 2 individuals, but the joining of 2 civilizations. Together, they will lead us into a future of peace and strength." Marcus barely heard the rest of the ceremony. His mind was racing with questions. What kind of union was this? What had he gotten himself into? And most importantly, why did it feel like everything was leading to this very moment? As the ceremony continued, Marcus felt Xerath's presence beside him, calm and steady. It was clear that this moment, whatever its true meaning was not just about a wedding. It was about something bigger, something neither of them fully understood yet. The officiant spoke the final words, and a wave of energy swept through the room, as if the very air had changed. The ceremony was complete. But as the Zorakian crowd erupted in applause, Marcus felt only uncertainty. The path ahead was unclear, but the wedding ceremony had ended, and the grand hall was now alive with the chatter and laughter of Zorakian dignitaries, ambassadors, and guests from across the galaxy. Yet, despite the celebration around him, Captain Marcus Stone stood at the edge of the room, his thoughts racing. He had expected the day to be filled with pomp and ceremony, but he hadn't expected it to feel like the first step in a much larger, unknown journey. Beside him, Princess Xerath smiled graciously, accepting congratulations from the other guests. Her poise and elegance were unmatched, but there was a strange heaviness in her eyes, a depth that Marcus had noticed since the moment they had met. She was the future of the Zorakian Empire, a figure of immense power, yet it seemed that even she had her own burdens to bear. As the crowd began to thin out, Xerath turned to Marcus. The room was quieter now, the hum of conversation fading into the background. "Captain Stone," she said, her voice calm but filled with a quiet urgency, "we need to talk." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. There had been something unsettling about the ceremony, something that didn't quite sit right. He had played his role, standing next to Xerath, receiving the respect of the Zorakians, but the whole event felt like it had been rehearsed. He had no idea why he was the one chosen, or what this so-called union really meant. "Of course," Marcus replied, his voice steady, though his mind was swirling with questions. "What's going on, Princess? What's this all really about?" Zareth led him to a quieter part of the palace, an elegant balcony overlooking the city of Zorak. The stars above twinkled like distant beacons, and the lights of the city shimmered like a living organism. For a moment, Marcus was awed by the beauty of the scene, but Zareth's words brought him back to reality. "You are not just here for the wedding, Marcus," she began, her eyes meeting his with a seriousness that made his chest tighten. "You are here because of the prophecy." Marcus frowned. "I thought we went over this. You said I was part of some prophecy that would unite our two peoples. But why me? What does that even mean?" Zareth's gaze softened slightly, and she sighed, as if the weight of the truth had been difficult to bear. "The prophecy speaks of a human, a soldier who will stand beside me, a ruler of two worlds. Our people face a threat, a danger that has been growing for centuries, one that could destroy both our civilizations. The prophecy claims that the only way to stop it is for the chosen human and I to unite, to lead our people together." Marcus listened intently, trying to piece together the fragments of information that had been slowly revealed to him. "A threat? What kind of threat are we talking about?" Zareth's voice lowered, and she stepped closer to him, her face full of concern. "The Vrain, a race of conquerors, older than the Zorakians. They have been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. They are powerful, ruthless, and their technology is beyond anything we've encountered. We fought them in small skirmishes, but the war is coming. And when it does, it will tear apart everything we've built." Marcus took a step back, trying to absorb the gravity of what Zareth had just said. "So, you're telling me that the fate of both the Zorakian Empire and Earth rests on me?" Zareth nodded, her expression serious. "Not just you. Me too. Together, we can form an alliance strong enough to face the Vrain. But we need to act quickly. Time is running out." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, trying to clear the fog that had settled in his mind. He had always thought of himself as a soldier, a fighter. His job had always been clear: protect his people, fight the enemies who threatened them, and return home. But this was something else entirely. "And if I refuse?" Marcus asked quietly, his voice betraying the uncertainty he felt. Zareth's eyes darkened, and she took a step closer. "If you refuse, then the prophecy is broken. The Vrain will attack, and both our worlds will fall. But there's more at stake than just us. This union, this partnership, is the key to our survival. The galaxy itself will either be saved or destroyed based on the choice we make." Marcus stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had come here as a guest, a soldier, a simple man in the midst of an intergalactic event. But now he was no longer just a bystander. He was part of something far bigger, a story written in the stars long before he had ever set foot on Zorakian soil. Zareth reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm but firm. "You don't have to understand everything now. You just need to trust that together, we can do this. You are my partner, Marcus, and together, we can save our worlds." Marcus stood still, staring at her, his mind racing. He had no choice but to accept the truth of the prophecy. The days following the revelation were filled with preparation. The atmosphere in the Zorakian palace had shifted. No longer was it simply a place of ceremony and grandeur. It was now a place of strategy and decision. Marcus Stone, once just a soldier, now found himself caught in the whirlwind of intergalactic politics, prophecies, and the looming threat of the Vrain. But the more time he spent with Princess Zareth, the more he understood that this was not just a political alliance. It was something deeper, something neither of them had fully expected. It had been a week since the truth about the prophecy had been laid out. In that time, Marcus and Zareth had met with Zorakian military commanders. Earth diplomats, and countless other leaders. They spoke of strategy, of war, of alliances. Every day, Marcus learned more about Zerakian technology and military tactics, and in turn, Zereth was learning about humanity's strength, resilience, and innovation. Despite the tense atmosphere, an unexpected bond was beginning to form between them. One evening, after a long day of briefings and discussions, Zereth invited Marcus to join her for a walk through the royal gardens. The gardens were a serene, peaceful place, filled with strange alien plants that shimmered in the moonlight. As they walked side by side, the weight of the galaxy seemed to fall away, and for the first time in days, Marcus felt a sense of calm. "You know," Marcus began, his voice breaking the silence, "I never expected any of this. One moment, I'm fighting for Earth, and the next, I'm here, standing by your side in the middle of a prophecy I don't even understand." Zereth smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I understand. I never expected this either. My life has been filled with duty, expectations, and responsibilities. I've spent so much time planning for the future, for the Empire, that I've forgotten how to just be, to feel, to trust." Marcus glanced at her, noticing the vulnerability in her eyes. It was strange to think of a princess, someone with so much power, as being uncertain or unsure. But in that moment, he saw a side of her he hadn't before, a side that made her more real, more human. "I think we both have a lot to learn," Marcus said quietly. "But I trust you, and I trust that we can make this work, whatever this is." Zereth looked at him, her violet eyes searching his face. "You have no idea how much that means to me, Marcus. I was chosen for this role, but I've always felt alone in it. I've never had someone who could understand the weight of it the way you do." They continued walking, the soft sounds of alien birds chirping in the distance. The tension of the past few days had eased, replaced by a quiet understanding between them. The future was uncertain, and the danger from the rain was real, but in that moment, Marcus realized something. Despite the vast differences between their two worlds, they shared something powerful. They shared the desire to protect what they loved, the desire to fight for a future where both of their civilizations could survive. As they reached a small pond at the center of the gardens, Zereth stopped and turned to Marcus. She took a deep breath and spoke softly. "I have to ask you something, Marcus. This bond, this partnership we are supposed to form, it is not just about a political alliance. It's about us, about you and me as equals. If we are to face what's coming, we cannot do it alone. We must rely on each other." Marcus looked at her, his heart beating faster. He knew this wasn't just about battle tactics or military strategy. This was about something deeper, something more personal. He had been thrown into this situation without warning, but over the past few days, he had come to realize that his place here, beside Zereth, was not just a duty. It was a choice. "I don't know what's ahead of us, Zereth," Marcus said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I know that I'll stand with you. I don't have all the answers, but I'm here. I'm with you." Zereth's expression softened, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked genuinely at peace. The tension that had gripped her seemed to melt away, and a small smile tugged at her lips. "Thank you, Marcus," she whispered. "Together, we can face anything." In that moment, as they stood in the moonlit garden, Marcus knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he was no longer just a soldier. He was part of something bigger, a partnership that could change the course of history. And as strange and uncertain as it all felt, Marcus felt a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in a long time. The bond between them had formed, not out of duty or prophecy, but out of trust. And that, he realized, was the most powerful weapon they had. The days after Marcus and Zereth's quiet walk through the gardens were filled with tense preparation. The Vrain were no longer just a distant threat, a whisper in the shadows. They were coming, and their forces were growing stronger by the day. The galaxy, both Zerachian and human civilizations, was on the edge of war. The time for preparation was over. The time for action had arrived. Zareth had called a summit of the most influential leaders from both the Zorakian Empire and Earth. They gathered in the grand war room of the palace, a vast chamber filled with holographic maps of star systems and military units. The room was dimly lit, the only source of light coming from the glowing projections scattered throughout the space. It was a room of strategy, of decisions that would determine the fate of two worlds. Marcus stood at the center of the room, his uniform pressed and neat, his face tense. The weight of the galaxy seemed to hang heavy on his shoulders. He had been trained for combat, for tactics, but this was different. This was a war that involved more than just soldiers. It involved alliances, trust, and the future of entire civilizations. Zareth stood beside him, her presence as commanding as ever. She was calm, composed, but Marcus could see the flicker of worry in her eyes. This wasn't just about leading her people anymore. It was about leading both peoples, human and Zorakian, into a future that no one could predict. A holographic map of the galaxy flickered to life before them, showing the Vrain fleet's movement. The fleet was vast, far larger than anything Marcus had ever seen. The Vrain were ruthless, their ships designed for one purpose: destruction. Marcus knew that their tactics were brutal, their motivations unclear, but one thing was certain: they wanted to conquer, and they would stop at nothing to do so. "We cannot let them invade Zorakian space," one of the Zorakian generals said, his voice deep with concern. "If they reach our homeworld, the Empire will fall. We must strike first." Marcus listened carefully, his mind already racing through the possibilities. A preemptive strike was risky, but it might be the only way to avoid total destruction. He glanced at Zareth, seeking her thoughts. She met his gaze, her eyes sharp and calculating. "We need to be careful," Zareth said, her voice steady. "We cannot underestimate them. The Vrain are not just a threat to our empire. They are a threat to everything we've built together. We must be united, or they will tear us apart." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed her words. It was clear that the Vrain were not just an external enemy. They were a challenge to the very foundation of the alliance between Zorakians and humans. If the two races could not work together, they would fall. Marcus felt the weight of Zareth's words settle in. She was right. The Vrain would exploit any weakness, any division between the two peoples. They had to work together. The alliance, this fragile, new partnership, was their only hope. As the discussions continued, Marcus's mind wandered for a moment. He thought about Earth, his home. He thought about the people he had left behind, the family and friends he had sworn to protect. He had always thought of himself as a protector, a soldier, but this was something else. This wasn't just about fighting for survival. This was about fighting for a future that was no longer just about his own species, but about both human and Zorakian survival. Zareth's voice pulled him back to the moment. "Marcus," she said, her tone calm yet filled with purpose, "we need your leadership now more than ever. Will you stand with me, not just as a soldier, but as a partner in this war?" Marcus looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had already chosen his path. His life had changed the moment he stepped onto the Zorakian ship. There was no turning back. "I'm with you, Zareth," he said, his voice firm. "We'll fight this together." The room erupted into quiet murmurs as the leaders began to discuss the next steps. Marcus and Zareth stood side by side, ready to lead. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, Marcus felt a sense of unity between them, between the Zorakian and human forces. It was a unity born out of necessity, but it was also a unity born out of trust that they could face whatever came next together. As the meeting progressed, Marcus felt the weight of what lay ahead, but there was a spark of something else within him, a sense of purpose. The Vrain were coming, but they were not invincible. They had underestimated the strength of the alliance between Earth and Zorak, and together they would fight to ensure that the galaxy, their homes, and their futures would not fall under the Vrain's shadow. The countdown had begun. The Vrain were no longer a distant threat. They were at the doorstep of the galaxy. Their fleet, a dark, menacing armada, moved swiftly toward Zorakian space. The alliance between humanity and the Zorakians had formed, but now it was time to see if it could hold up under the weight of war. Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the U.S. Titan, gazing out at the vast expanse of space, his heart pounding. The battle would begin soon, and the future of two civilizations rested on the success of this mission. Beside him, Princess Zareth stood tall, her face calm but her eyes sharp with focus. It was hard to believe that the woman who had been a princess of a peaceful empire was now preparing to lead her people into a war for survival. They had trained together, learned from each other, and now, in this moment, they were partners. Partners in war, partners in the future of the galaxy. "Are the fleets ready?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but filled with the gravity of the situation. Zareth nodded. "Yes. The Zorakian fleet is in position, and the Earth forces are on standby. We have the advantage of knowing their tactics, but we cannot underestimate them." Marcus turned toward the holographic display, which showed the positions of both the Vrain fleet and their own forces. The enemy ships were large and imposing, their sleek designs meant for intimidation. The Zorakian ships, on the other hand, had a more organic feel, alive with bioluminescence, but they were just as deadly in battle. Earth's fleet was smaller, but their ingenuity and determination were their greatest strengths. Together, the two fleets would face the Vrain head-on. "We'll need to strike hard and fast," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the tactical map. "If we hesitate, they'll have us cornered. We can't give them a chance to gain ground." Zareth stepped closer to him, her eyes unwavering. "I trust you, Marcus, but remember, this is not just about fighting the Vrain. This is about sending a message to the entire galaxy. If we fall, so does the peace we've worked for." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her words. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for unity, for the future of all the species who had once believed that peace was possible. Now that peace was hanging by a thread, and it was up to them to protect it. The first shots rang out as the battle began. The Vrain fleet moved quickly, their ships charging forward like a swarm of dark insects. Zorakian and human ships met them in a massive clash of energy and firepower. The sound of weapons discharging filled the bridge of the U.S. Titan as the crew moved quickly, executing their orders with precision. Marcus stood firm, his eyes fixed on the battle unfolding in space. His mind was sharp, calculating the next moves even as the chaos raged around him. It was all happening so fast, yet he knew exactly what had to be done. He had trained for moments like this his entire life. "Admiral," Zareth called out, her voice steady even amidst the chaos. "We need to disable their flagship. If we can take it down, the rest of their fleet will scatter." Marcus turned toward her, already knowing the plan. He gave a quick nod. "We'll make it happen." The U.S. Titan surged forward, breaking through the Vrain's front lines. Their flagship, a massive, jagged ship covered in dark armor, loomed in front of them. It was heavily protected, but Marcus knew that they had to take it down if they had any chance of victory. "Prepare to fire," Marcus ordered, his voice calm but filled with intensity. The crew sprang into action, their movements synchronized as the ship's weapons locked onto the enemy flagship. The first volley of shots hit, but the Vrain ship's shields held strong. Marcus clenched his jaw. They needed to hit harder. "Target their engines," he commanded. "If we can't disable the shields, we'll cripple their ability to fight back." The U.S. Titan fired again, this time hitting the flagship's engine core. Sparks flew from the enemy ship as it rocked violently. The shields flickered, and Marcus saw the opportunity. "Now," he shouted. The crew fired once more, this time directly at the vulnerable core. The Vrain flagship exploded in a burst of light, sending shockwaves through space. The remaining Vrain ships, seeing their command ship destroyed, hesitated. It was the opening they needed. Zorakian and Earth ships pushed forward, attacking the now disorganized Vrain fleet with everything they had. It was a brutal, relentless assault, but it was working. The Vrain fleet began to break apart, their forces scattering as their morale crumbled. As the battle raged on, Marcus felt a strange sense of hope rise within him. It wasn't over yet, but this was a victory, one that showed the power of the alliance between Zorakians and humans. Together, they had stood strong against a force that seemed unbeatable. Zareth stood beside him, watching the aftermath of the battle felt like a strange kind of silence. The sky above Zorak was still, the stars now shining brightly in a victory that had seemed impossible just days before. The Vrain fleet had been defeated, their flagship destroyed, and their forces scattered. Earth and the Zorakian Empire had emerged victorious, but the cost had been high. Many ships had been lost, and countless lives had been sacrificed in the struggle. Yet, despite the destruction, Marcus Stone stood on the balcony of the Zorakian palace, looking out at the city below. The buildings, once filled with tension and worry, now gleamed in the light of a new dawn. The air felt different, fresher, as if the very world had been reborn. The battle was over, but a new chapter had begun, not just for Zorak and Earth, but for the galaxy itself. Beside him, Princess Zareth stood with a quiet grace, her gaze also fixed on the horizon. The purple hue of her gown shimmered as the wind gently swirled around them. The war was won, but there was still much to be done. It wasn't just about rebuilding the fleets or repairing the damage done to their worlds. It was about healing the wounds between their two peoples, about forging a lasting peace that would carry them into the future. "You did it, Marcus," Zareth said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion, but also with relief. "We did it." Marcus turned to look at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. The weight of the victory, of everything they had accomplished together, was still sinking in. He had never imagined that he would be standing here with her, not just as a soldier, but as a partner. The journey had been long, filled with uncertainty, but it had brought them to this moment, a moment where the future seemed bright, full of possibilities. "I couldn't have done it without you," Marcus replied, his voice steady but full of gratitude. "You led us through this, Zareth. You were the heart of this alliance. I was just the soldier who followed your lead." Zareth smiled, her eyes meeting his with a depth of understanding. "It wasn't just my leadership, it was our leadership. We both brought something to this partnership, something that neither of our worlds could have achieved alone." The quiet moment between them was interrupted as a group of Zorakian officials entered the room. They were here to discuss the next steps, the rebuilding, the peace treaties, and the alliances that would be formed. The war was over, but the work had only just begun. Marcus and Zareth had already made history, but now they had to build a future. As they sat down to the council table, Marcus found himself at ease. The fear, the uncertainty that had plagued him for so long was gone. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something bigger, something worth protecting. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of a new era, an era where humanity and the Zorakian Empire could work together as equals, united against the darkness of the galaxy. "The future of both our peoples rests on the decisions we make today," Zareth said as she addressed the council. "We have proven that unity is possible, that together we are stronger. But now we must build a lasting peace. We must move forward, hand in hand, and ensure that the sacrifices we've made were not in vain." Marcus watched as Zareth spoke with passion, her voice carrying the weight of their shared journey. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and obstacles, but he also knew that they would face them together. And for the first time, Marcus believed that the future was bright, because they weren't just facing it as soldiers or rulers. They were facing it as partners, as equals, ready to build a new galaxy where peace and unity were possible. As the council meeting continued, Marcus looked at Zareth again, a new understanding between them. This was only the beginning. Together, they had started a revolution, not just of the body, but of the heart. And no matter what came next, they would face it together, side by side.